The sound of sirens pierced the summer air as Marcus watched his neighbor Karen screaming at the police officers, pointing frantically at the empty concrete crater where his pool used to be. "That's my pool! He stole it! Arrest him!" But what Karen didn't know, what no one knew, was that buried beneath 20 years of chlorinated water lay evidence that would destroy her perfect life forever. Because sometimes, when you empty a pool, you don't just drain the water, you drain the lies. Marcus Chen pressed the power button on the pool pump and watched the water level drop inch by inch. 23 years he'd lived in this house. 23 years of swimming laps at dawn, hosting birthday parties, teaching his kids to dive. Now the concrete basin looked like an open wound in his backyard. "You sure about this, Dad?" His daughter Sarah stood beside him, her arms crossed against the morning chill. At 25, she had their mother's worried expression, the same crease between her eyebrows that Lily used to get when the bills piled up. "The foundation's cracking. Pool company says if we don't fix it now, we'll lose the whole structure." Marcus wiped his hands on his jeans, avoiding his daughter's gaze. The real reason sat heavier in his chest. Lily's medical bills had finally caught up with them. Even 2 years after the cancer took her, the debt collectors still called. The pump churned steadily, mechanical and indifferent. Across the fence, Karen Fletcher's kitchen window overlooked their yard. Marcus caught glimpses of her blonde hair as she paced back and forth, probably on one of her morning phone calls to her book club, dissecting the neighborhood's latest drama. "I still think there's another way," Sarah said. "Maybe we could get a loan." "Sarah." Marcus's voice carried the weight of a man who'd already explored every option. "Your mom and I refinanced twice. There's nothing left to borrow against." The water had dropped 3 feet when Marcus noticed something odd. Along the deep-end wall, where the concrete met the tile line, dark stains had appeared. Not the usual calcium buildup or algae, something else. Something that had been hidden beneath years of chemical blue water. By noon, the pool was half empty. Marcus knelt beside the exposed walls, running his fingers over what looked like old caulking along the seams, except caulking didn't crumble. Like this, didn't leave rust-colored residue on his fingertips. "What is that stuff?" Sarah crouched beside him. Before Marcus could answer, Karen Fletcher's voice cut across the yard like a serrated blade. "Excuse me! Excuse me!" Marcus straightened to find his neighbor standing at their shared fence line, her manicured hands gripping the wooden slats. Karen was 48, but spent enough on maintenance to pass for 35. Her yoga pants and designer tank top screamed, expensive casual, the uniform of a woman who'd never worked a day but somehow afforded a house twice the size of Marcus's. "Yes, Karen? What exactly are you doing to our pool?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt Sarah tense beside him. "I'm sorry. Our pool?" Karen's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "The property survey was very clear when Richard and I moved in 15 years ago. That pool extends onto our property line. Technically, we own the eastern half." Marcus had lived through enough of Karen's property disputes to recognize the pattern. Last year, she'd tried to claim his oak tree was damaging her foundation. Before that, she'd insisted his driveway encroached on her land by 6 inches. "Karen, you know that's not true. We built this pool in 2001. You didn't even live here then." "I have documentation." She held up a manila folder like evidence in a trial. "Richard's attorney reviewed everything. You're going to need to stop this drainage immediately." Sarah stepped forward. "Are you seriously trying to claim half of our pool?" "I'm not claiming anything, dear. I'm stating facts." Karen's condescending tone could have frozen lava. "Perhaps your father should have checked property lines before making major modifications to shared assets." Marcus felt his jaw clench. 23 years of Karen's escalating demands. 23 years of watching her manufacture crises whenever she was bored or needed attention. But this crossed every line. "The pool is entirely on our property." Karen, it always has been. We'll see about that. She turned on her designer heel and stalked back toward her house. I'm calling the police. She's bluffing, Sarah whispered. But Marcus knew better. Karen Fletcher never bluffed. She escalated. The pool continued draining through the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, only 2 feet of water remained, and the stains along the walls had become impossible to ignore. What Marcus had initially dismissed as old caulking now looked deliberately applied. Thick lines of some kind of sealant running along specific sections of the pool's structure. He was examining the deepest part of the pool when the first police cruiser pulled into his driveway. Officer Janet Reyes climbed out of the patrol car with the weary expression of someone who'd handled too many neighbor disputes. Behind her, a second officer emerged, younger, eager, hand resting on his radio. Mr. Chen, I'm Officer Reyes. We received a complaint about property destruction. Before Marcus could respond, Karen's front door flew open. She swept across her perfectly manicured lawn like an avenging angel, the manila folder clutched against her chest. Officers, thank goodness you're here. Her voice trembled with manufactured emotion. This man is destroying our pool without permission. Ma'am, let's start from the beginning. Officer Reyes pulled out a notebook. You're claiming ownership of this pool? Partial ownership. The eastern half extends onto our property. Karen opened her folder with dramatic flair. I have survey documents, architectural plans, everything. Marcus felt the world tilt sideways as Karen handed over a stack of papers. The documents looked official. Letterhead, stamps, signatures. His mouth went dry. Mr. Chen? Officer Reyes studied the papers. Do you have documentation showing the pool is entirely on your property? We built it 23 years ago. The permits should be on file with the city. Should be isn't the same as having them in hand. Karen's smile was triumphant. I'm sure you understand, officers, that I can't allow him to continue damaging our shared property. The younger officer was already circling the pool, taking pictures with his phone. Marcus watched helplessly as the man documented the exposed walls, the strange staining, the equipment scattered across his backyard. Here's what we're going to do, Officer Reyes said. Mr. Chen, I need you to stop all work on this pool until property ownership can be verified. Mrs. Fletcher, you'll need to file a formal complaint if you want to pursue this legally. I'm filing it today. Karen's voice rang with satisfaction. As the officers prepared to leave, Marcus noticed something that made his blood freeze. The younger officer had stopped at the deep end of the pool, crouching beside one of the stained areas. He was scraping at the sealant with his pen, examining the dark residue underneath. Hey, Reyes, the officer called. You might want to take a look at this. Officer Reyes joined him at the pool's edge. Marcus couldn't hear their conversation, but he watched their expressions change from routine boredom to sharp attention. Mr. Chen, Officer Reyes called, when did you say this pool was built? 2001, May of 2001. The officers exchanged glances. Marcus felt Sarah's hand slip into his. And you've owned this property continuously since then? Yes. My wife and I bought the house in 1998. Officer Reyes made notes while her partner continued scraping at the stained concrete. Whatever they were seeing down there had shifted their entire demeanor. Mrs. Fletcher, Officer Reyes said carefully, these documents you've provided, when were they prepared? Last month, when Richard's attorney reviewed our property boundaries. Another exchange of glances between the officers. Karen's confident smile began to flicker. We're going to need both of you to stay available over the next few days, Officer Reyes said. There may be additional questions. As the patrol cars pulled away, Marcus found himself staring down at the exposed pool walls. The dark stains seemed more pronounced now, more deliberate, like someone had gone to great lengths to seal something inside the concrete structure. Dad? Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. What do you think they saw down there? Marcus didn't answer. He was remembering the summer of 2001, when he and Lily had hired a contractor recommended by their new neighbors, the Bishops, who'd lived in Karen's house before her. The contractor had been cheap, reliable, and eager to work for cash. He was also remembering that the contractor's name had been Richard Fletcher, Karen's husband. The same Richard who had supposedly reviewed property surveys last month. The same Richard who had somehow provided his wife with documentation claiming ownership of a pool he had built himself 20 years ago. Marcus looked across the fence at Karen's house, where warm light glowed in the kitchen windows. Somewhere inside, she was probably celebrating her victory, planning her next move, confident that she had outmaneuvered another neighbor. But as the evening shadows lengthened across his drained pool, Marcus realized that Karen Fletcher had made the first mistake of her perfectly orchestrated life. She had forgotten that when you empty a pool, you don't just reveal the bottom. You reveal everything that was meant to stay buried. Marcus couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Officer Reyes crouched beside his pool, scraping at those dark stains with growing intensity. At 3 a.m., he gave up and padded to the kitchen window that overlooked the backyard. The pool sat empty under the moonlight, a concrete crater that seemed to pulse with secrets. The remaining puddle of water at the bottom reflected stars like a black mirror. His phone buzzed. Sarah's name lit up the screen. "Dad, are you awake?" "Yes, sweetheart, can't sleep either. I keep thinking about today, about Karen's documents. Dad, what if she's telling the truth?" Marcus pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "She's not. Your mom and I built that pool fair and square. We have the permits somewhere in the filing cabinet." "Then why do the police seem so interested in it?" That was the question eating at him. Why had two routine officers suddenly become so focused on concrete stains? Why had their entire demeanor shifted from bored bureaucrats to investigators? "I don't know, baby, but we'll figure it out." After Sarah hung up, Marcus found himself pulling on jeans and a jacket. He needed to see those stains up close, without Karen's theatrical performance and police documentation clouding his judgment. The backyard was silver quiet under the moon. Marcus grabbed a flashlight from the garage and climbed down the pool's shallow end steps. The concrete felt strange under his bare feet, too smooth in some places, rougher in others, as if different materials had been mixed at different times. The stains were more extensive than he'd realized. Dark lines ran along the wall joints, but also in seemingly random patterns across the pool floor. Under the flashlight beam, they looked almost deliberate, like a map of something. Marcus knelt beside the deepest concentration of staining and touched the concrete. His finger came away with a rust-colored residue that smelled metallic. Not rust, something organic, something that had been sealed away for decades. "Find something interesting?" Marcus spun toward the voice. A figure stood at the pool's edge, silhouetted against the house lights. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought it was an intruder. Then the man stepped into the moonlight. Richard Fletcher, Karen's husband. "Richard?" Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. "It's late." "Couldn't sleep. Saw your flashlight." Richard was 60, silver-haired, with the kind of expensive casual wear that suggested retirement funded by smart investments. He'd always been cordial but distant, the kind of neighbor who waved from his driveway but never lingered for conversation. Now he was staring down at Marcus with an expression that was impossible to read. "Karen told me about today, about the property dispute." Marcus climbed the pool steps slowly, keeping the flashlight beam low. Something in Richard's tone made his skin crawl. "There's no dispute. This pool is on my property." "Of course it is." Richard's smile was thin as paper. "I should know. I built it." The admission hung between them like a loaded gun. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. "You built it?" "Summer of 2001. You and Lily hired me through the bishop's recommendation. I was just starting my contracting business back then. Needed the work. Richard's eyes never left Marcus's face. You paid cash. $10,000. Marcus remembered. The young contractor who'd seemed so eager, so professional, who'd worked quickly and efficiently while Lily picked out tiles and Marcus dreamed of teaching his kids to swim. You never mentioned that Karen was your wife. Wasn't at the time. We didn't meet until 2007. Married in 2009. Richard stepped closer to the pool's edge. Funny how life works out. Building a pool in the neighborhood where I'd eventually live. Then you know the property lines. You know this pool is entirely on my land. Richard's laugh was soft and humorless. Marcus, you're missing the bigger picture here. What bigger picture? Instead of answering, Richard pulled out his phone and activated the flashlight app. He aimed the beam down at the stained concrete where Marcus had been examining. You know what those stains are? Marcus's mouth went dry. Old sealant, waterproofing. No. Richard's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. That's blood. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, nearly dropping his flashlight. What did you just say? 21 years ago, I made a mistake during construction. A big mistake. Richard's face was granite in the moonlight. Had to clean it up quickly before you and Lily came home from your weekend getaway. Mixed up a special concrete batch, sealed everything tight. Marcus felt the world spinning around him. Richard, what are you talking about? You hired me to build you a pool, Marcus. I built you a tomb. Before Marcus could respond, Richard's phone lit up with an incoming call. Karen's name flashed on the screen. Speaking of my wife, Richard answered. Yes, dear? What do you mean they're back? Now? At this hour? Marcus could hear Karen's voice through the phone, high-pitched and agitated, but couldn't make out words. I'll be right there. Richard ended the call and looked at Marcus with something that might have been pity. The police are at our house, with a warrant. The words didn't make sense. A warrant for what? Marcus. Richard's voice was infinitely patient, like he was explaining something to a child. What do you think happens when you call the police? About a property dispute, and they find evidence of human remains? Human remains. The phrase echoed in Marcus's skull like a scream. You're lying. Am I? Richard was already walking toward the fence line. You might want to get dressed. They'll be here next. Marcus watched Richard disappear into the shadows between their houses. Then he was running, stumbling up the pool steps and across the yard. His hands shook as he fumbled with the back door. Lock. Inside, he grabbed his laptop and typed frantically, Richard Fletcher Contractor 2001 Chicago Missing Persons. The search results made his blood freeze. The first headline, Local man vanishes during home construction project. Police seek information on missing worker. The date, May 15th, 2001. Marcus clicked through article after article, his horror growing with each paragraph. Danny Restrepo, age 24. Construction worker who'd been hired as Richard Fletcher's assistant on a residential pool installation. Last seen leaving his apartment on May 14th, heading to a job site in Oak Park. Danny's mother, Maria Restrepo, had filed a missing person report. She'd been quoted extensively, describing her son as reliable, responsible, excited about his new job with a promising young contractor. The investigation had gone nowhere. Danny had simply vanished. No body, no evidence, no leads. Richard Fletcher had told police that Danny never showed up for work that day. The pool project had been completed solo. Case closed, file buried, until now. Marcus scrolled through more articles, finding follow-up stories from 2002, 2005, 2010. Maria Restrepo had never stopped looking for her son. She'd organized search parties, hired private investigators, offered rewards. She'd died in 2018, still not knowing what happened to Danny. The laptop screen seemed to pulse with accusation. Marcus thought about the cash payment, Richard's insistence on working alone certain days, the way he'd always mixed his own concrete. His phone rang. Sarah. "Dad, there are police cars all over the Fletcher house. What's going on?" Marcus looked out his kitchen window. Red and blue lights painted the night sky like an aurora of guilt. "Sarah, I need you to stay at your apartment tonight. Don't come over here." "Why? Dad, you're scaring me." How could he explain? How could he tell his daughter that their family pool, where she'd learned to swim, celebrated birthdays, made 1,000 happy memories, was built on top of someone's son? "Just stay put. I'll call you in the morning." Marcus hung up and sank into a kitchen chair. Through the window, he watched as crime scene vehicles pulled into his driveway. Officers in protective suits began setting up floodlights around his pool. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "They're going to find Danny. Karen thinks she's so smart, but she just handed them the evidence they've been looking for since 2001. R." Marcus stared at the message, his mind reeling. Richard was confessing to murder via text, but there was something else in those words, something about Karen. Another text appeared. "She doesn't know. About Danny, about any of it. She really thinks she owns half your pool. Isn't that hilarious?" Then a third message that made Marcus's blood turn to ice. "But she's about to find out that some property disputes come with a life sentence." Through his window, Marcus watched as Karen Fletcher was led out of her house in handcuffs, her perfect blonde hair disheveled, her voice carrying across the neighborhood in one long, incredulous scream. She was still insisting the pool belonged to her, even as the crime scene team began excavating human remains from its concrete floor. Detective Ray Kowalski had worked homicide for 15 years, but he'd never seen a case quite like this one. A missing person from 2001, a neighbor dispute over a pool, and a construction contractor who'd just confessed to murder via text message, while his wife got arrested for filing false police reports. The pre-dawn chaos in Oak Park looked like a movie set. Crime scene lights turned the suburban street into a blazing stage where neighbors huddled in bathrobes, watching 21 years of secrets get jackhammered out of concrete. "Mr. Chen?" Detective Kowalski approached Marcus, who sat on his back, steps wrapped in a blanket, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. "I need to ask you some questions." Marcus looked up with hollow eyes. "Is it really him? Danny Restrepo?" "We won't know for certain until the medical examiner completes his work, but..." Kowalski glanced toward the pool, where technicians were carefully extracting bones from the broken concrete. "The preliminary assessment suggests remains consistent with a young adult male, buried approximately 20 years ago." Marcus buried, his face in his hands. "I had no idea. God help me, I had no idea." "We believe you, Mr. Chen. Richard Fletcher's text messages make it clear you weren't involved." Kowalski sat beside him on the steps. "But I need to understand the timeline. You hired Fletcher in 2001? "May. Lily and I had been saving for years. The Bishops, the couple who lived where the Fletchers are now, they recommended him. Said he was young, reliable, affordable. And you paid cash? $10,000. Richard said it would save on taxes." Marcus laughed bitterly. "We thought we were getting a deal." Inside the Fletcher house, Kowalski could hear Karen's voice, rising in indignant protest. She'd been released from custody an hour ago when it became clear she genuinely had no knowledge of the murder. Her attorney had arrived 20 minutes later, a sharp-suited woman who looked like she specialized in high-stakes divorce cases. "Detective!" one of the crime scene technicians called from the pool. "You need to see this." Kowalski left Marcus on the steps and approached the excavation site. The concrete had been broken away in careful sections, revealing what had been hidden for 2 decades. Danny Restrepo's remains lay in a shallow depression that had been carved into the earth before the pool was built, a grave disguised as a construction project. "Look at this," the technician said, pointing to something beside the skeleton. "Wallet, still intact. Driver's license confirms the identity, but there's more." The technician held up an evidence bag containing what looked like a small notebook, water-damaged but readable. Kid was keeping a journal about the job. Last entry is dated May 14th, 2001, day before he disappeared. Kowalski pulled on gloves and carefully opened the notebook. Danny's handwriting was neat, precise. "Richard is acting strange today. Keeps checking his watch, looking nervous. Asked me to stay late tomorrow to finish the deep-end excavation. Said he wants to get the concrete poured before the weekend. Something doesn't feel right." The entry before that was even more damning. "Overhead Richard on the phone today. Sounded like he was arguing with someone about money. Heard him say, 'I don't care what it costs, it has to look like an accident.' When he saw me listening, he got really quiet. I'm starting to think I should look for another job." "Jesus," Kowalski muttered. The kid knew something was wrong. His radio crackled. "Detective Kowalski, we've got Richard Fletcher in custody. He's asking to make a statement." Kowalski looked across the crime scene at Marcus Chin, still sitting on his steps like a broken man. 21 years of swimming in a pool built on murder. 21 years of birthday parties and family barbecues over Danny Restrepo's grave. "I'll be right there," he told the radio. The Oak Park police station interrogation room smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Richard Fletcher sat across from Detective Kowalski, his expensive retirement wardrobe replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His lawyer, a public defender who looked about 12 years old, kept shooting nervous glances at the recording equipment. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Mr. Fletcher," Kowalski said. "You're confessing to the murder of Daniel Restrepo on May 15th, 2001? "I am." "And you buried his body in the foundation of a residential swimming pool?" "Yes." The lawyer winced. "Richard, maybe we should—" "No." Richard's voice was calm, almost relieved. "I've been carrying this for 21 years. It's time." Kowalski leaned forward. "Tell me what happened." Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he spoke, his voice was distant, like he was reading someone else's story. "I was 28. Just started my own construction business after working for other contractors for 5 years. Danny was my first employee. Good kid, hard worker, reminded me of my younger brother. I liked him. So what went wrong? Money." Richard's laugh was hollow. "Always comes down to money, doesn't it? I'd bid on the Chen job too low, way too low. By the time we started excavation, I was already 3,000 in the hole, and I still had to buy materials, pay Danny, somehow make a profit." Richard paused, his eyes focusing on something beyond the interrogation room walls. "I had a gambling problem back then. Poker mostly. Underground games with serious people who didn't accept, 'I'll pay you next week' as an answer. I owed 12 grand to guys who used crowbars to collect debts." "So you decided to kill your employee?" "No." Richard's composure cracked for the first time. "Jesus, no. It wasn't supposed to happen like that." The lawyer was frantically scribbling notes, probably preparing an insanity defense. "Then what was it supposed to happen like?" Richard's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Insurance fraud. I was going to stage an accident. Danny falls into the excavation, concrete mixer tips over, crushes him. Tragic workplace accident. I collect on his life insurance policy. I'd made myself the beneficiary when I hired him, told him it was standard procedure for small businesses." Kowalski felt sick. "You insured your employee's life and then planned to murder him for the payout?" It seemed logical. At the time. I was desperate, scared. Those guys I owed money to, they weren't going to wait much longer. But something went wrong with your plan. Danny figured it out. Richard's eyes filled with tears. He found the insurance paperwork in my truck, confronted me about it that last day, said he was going to report me, find another job. So you killed him. I panicked. We were alone at the job site. Marcus and Lily had gone away for the weekend. Danny was standing at the edge of the excavation, waving the insurance papers at me, calling me a psycho. I pushed him. Richard was crying now, 21 years of guilt finally breaking through. He hit his head on the way down. On a piece of rebar. There was so much blood. I climbed down to help him, but he was already... Richard's voice broke. Already gone. And then you decided to bury him in the pool foundation. What else could I do? Call the police? Tell them I'd killed my employee while trying to commit insurance fraud? I was already in debt to dangerous people, and now I was looking at murder. Charges. Richard wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. So I worked all night, dug the grave deeper, positioned his body, mixed the concrete. By Monday morning, when Marcus and Lily came home, it looked like nothing had happened. Just their new pool, ready for water. Kowalski studied Richard's face, looking for signs of deception. All he saw was exhaustion and relief. What about the insurance money? Never collected it. Couldn't bring myself to file the claim. Danny was officially a missing person, not a workplace fatality. The whole plan was pointless. And you've been living with this secret ever since? Every single day. Do you know what it's like to drive past that house? To see the Chen kids learning to swim in that pool? To watch Marcus hosting birthday parties over my victim's grave? Richard's lawyer finally found his voice. My client is clearly suffering from severe psychological distress. Your client is a murderer. Kowalski cut him off. Then, to Richard, what I don't understand is Karen. If you've been so tormented by guilt, why did you help her file false property claims? For the first time since the confession began, Richard smiled. It was a cold, calculating expression that made Kowalski's skin crawl. I didn't help her. I manipulated her. What do you mean? Karen's been making my life hell for 15 years. Property disputes, noise complaints, HOA violations. She's a narcissist who feeds on conflict and attention. When I realized Marcus was going to drain the pool for repairs, I knew Danny's body would be discovered. Richard leaned back in his chair, looking almost proud. So I fed Karen fake documents, convinced her she had a legitimate property claim. Let her make a scene, call the police, demand they investigate the pool. She thought she was destroying Marcus Chen's life. She was actually exposing my crime. The confession room fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. You used your wife to reveal a 21-year-old murder? She's not really my wife. Not in any way that matters. We haven't been happy in years. This just accelerated the inevitable. Kowalski thought about Karen Fletcher, sitting in another part of the station with her attorney, still trying to understand how her property dispute had turned into a murder investigation. Where does this leave her? Richard shrugged. Filing. For divorce, probably. Starting over somewhere else. Maybe prison if they can prove she know. Karen Fletcher sat in her attorney's BMW outside the Oak Park police station at 6 a.m., watching the sun rise over the wreckage of her life. The coffee in her hands had gone cold hours ago, but she couldn't stop gripping the cup. If she let go, she might fall apart completely. The DA isn't pressing charges for the false reports, her attorney, Patricia Wells, said for the third time. Richard's confession makes it clear you were manipulated. You're a victim here, Karen. Victim. The word tasted like poison in Karen's mouth. I believed those documents were real, she whispered. I actually believed I owned half of that pool. Because your husband forged very convincing paperwork. No, Karen's voice was getting stronger. Because I wanted to believe it. Because I've spent 15 years trying to take things from Marcus Chen, and this felt like the big score. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Karen, you're in shock. You shouldn't be making admissions. What am I admitting to? Being a terrible person? Karen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Patricia, I once called the city to report Marcus for having grass that was an inch too long. I sued him because his sprinkler system sprayed water onto my driveway. I've spent a decade and a half making that man's life miserable because I was bored and bitter and needed someone to blame for my unhappiness. Through the BMW's tinted windows, Karen watched crime scene vehicles leaving the Chen property. 24 hours ago, she'd been planning her victory celebration. Now she was watching investigators remove a young man's bones from what she'd thought was her pool. Her phone buzzed. Text message from her sister in California. Saw the news. Are you okay? Call me. The news. Karen pulled up the Chicago Tribune website and saw her own face staring back at her. The headline made her stomach lurch. Suburban wife unknowingly exposes husband's 21-year murder cover-up in pool dispute. The article was brutal in its accuracy. It detailed Richard's confession, the discovery of Danny Restrepo's remains, and Karen's role as an unwitting catalyst. But it also included background research on her previous legal actions against neighbors, painting a picture of a woman whose litigious nature had accidentally served justice. They're calling me a hero, she said, scrolling through the comments. Some people think I suspected Richard all along and engineered this whole thing to expose him. That's good, Patricia said. Public sympathy will help if... I'm not a hero. Karen's voice cut through the lawyer's optimism like glass. I'm the reason that boy's mother died without knowing what happened to her son. If I hadn't been such a vindictive bitch, if I'd just left Marcus alone, Danny Restrepo would still be buried under that pool. Patricia Wells had handled dozens of high-profile cases, but she'd never seen a client so determined to destroy her own public relations advantage. Karen, listen to me. You cannot blame yourself for your husband's crimes. You cannot... Can't I? Karen turned to face her attorney. Patricia, I've been married to Richard for 14 years. 14 years of watching him work late, take unexplained phone calls, disappear for hours at a time. 14 years of him flinching every time someone mentioned the Chen family. Do you know what I thought all those years? What? I thought he was having an affair with Lily Chen. Even after she got sick, even after she died, I convinced myself that Richard had been in love with her. That's why I hated Marcus so much. I thought he had something that belonged to me. The confession hung in the luxury car's leather interior like smoke. I was jealous of a dead woman because I couldn't imagine any other reason why my husband would be so obsessed with that family. Never occurred to me that he was obsessed because he'd buried a body in their backyard. Patricia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. It's the DA's office. I should take this. She stepped out of the car, leaving Karen alone with her thoughts. Through the police station windows, Karen could see activity in the interview rooms. Somewhere in there, Richard was probably still talking, still confessing, still unraveling 21 years of lies. She wondered if he felt relief or regret. She wondered if he thought about her at all. Her phone rang. Marcus Chen's name appeared on the screen. Karen stared at the phone for 3 rings before answering. Hello, Marcus. Karen. His voice sounded older, worn down by the night's revelations. I don't know what I wanted. To gloat? To tell me I got what I deserved? No. The gentleness in his tone almost broke her. To say I'm sorry. You're sorry? Marcus, my husband murdered someone in your backyard. I spent 15 years making your life hell over property that was never in dispute. What could you possibly be sorry for? I'm sorry you were married to a killer. I'm sorry you didn't know who you were living with. I'm sorry this is how you found out. Karen closed her eyes, tears finally coming. I don't deserve your kindness. Maybe not. But you deserve the truth, and you never had that. Through the phone, Karen could hear the sounds of Marcus's house. Coffee, brewing, morning news on television, the normal sounds of a life continuing despite everything. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. The city condemned the property. Can't live in a house built over a crime scene. Sarah and I are staying at a hotel until we figure out what comes next. I mean with us, with the neighborhood. Karen, Marcus's voice was infinitely patient. There is no us. There is no neighborhood. Not anymore. The line went quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, Marcus continued, I never understood why you hated me so much. I kept thinking I must have done something, said something to make you so angry. You didn't do anything. That was the problem. What do you mean? Karen watched Patricia pacing outside the car, gesticulating into her phone. You had everything I thought I wanted. A happy marriage, kids who adored you, neighbors who respected you. Even after Lily got sick, even after she died, you handled it with such grace. I kept waiting for you to fall apart, to become bitter like me. But you never did. I fell apart plenty. You just didn't see it. No, Marcus, you grieved. There's a difference. Karen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I never learned how to grieve. I just learned how to hate. Patricia returned to the car, her expression grim. Marcus, I have to go, Karen said. Take care of yourself, Karen. And for what it's worth, I forgive you. The line went dead. Karen stared at the phone, those 3 words echoing in her head. I forgive you. What did the DA want? She asked Patricia. They need you to testify at Richard's trial. And Karen, Patricia's voice was carefully neutral. They found more documents in Richard's home office, more forged paperwork. This wasn't the first time he's done this. Karen felt the world shift again. What do you mean? Property disputes going back to 2010, always targeting the Chen family but also other neighbors. Richard has been creating fake documentation to support your legal actions for years. The coffee cup slipped from Karen's hands, spilling cold liquid across her lap. You're telling me that every lawsuit, every property complaint, every legal action I've taken in the past decade was based on forged documents? Most of them, yes. Karen thought about the oak tree dispute, the driveway encroachment, the noise complaints, all of it supported by Richard's helpful research, Richard's mysterious attorney connections, Richard's convenient access to official-looking paperwork. He turned me into his weapon, she whispered. He used my anger, my bitterness, and he aimed it at innocent people. Karen, how many lives did I help him destroy? How many people did I hurt because I was too stupid to see what he was doing? Patricia didn't answer, which was answer enough. Karen Fletcher sat in the luxury car outside the police station and finally understood the true scope of her husband's manipulation. For 14 years, she'd thought she was the predator in her marriage, the one with the sharp teeth and territorial instincts. Now she realized she'd been the prey all along, and somewhere in the ruins of the life she'd thought she was living, she found something she'd never expected to feel: sympathy for the woman she'd been, the lonely, angry, bitter woman who'd been so hungry for victory that she'd let a killer feed her exactly what she wanted to hear. The woman who'd spent 15 years fighting the wrong war while the real enemy slept beside her every night.